KNON 89.3 FM in Dallas and Fort Worth, the voice of the people.
Business owners, tell KNON's listeners about your business. You can put your business or event on KNON. KNON currently has space available to run announcements for you. Tell KNON's listeners about your goods, services, nightclub, concert, or event. Help keep the voice of the people on the air while putting your information on the air. KNON's been named the #1 radio station in Dallas by both the Dallas Observer and D Magazine. Put your business with Dallas's #1 station. Call now for more information at 214-828-9500, extension 227, or extension 233. For more information, go to KNON.org and click on the Run Spots on KNON page. It's a great way for your business to support community radio while letting more people know about you.
What a game! What a game!
Jim Schutze here with Jim Schutze, back at you with Get Off My Lawn, the weekly show where we talk about what it is in the city and what's really going on. This is the KNON radio version of Column I Write for the Dallas Observer news blog, which is called Unfair Park. And that column is also called Get Off My Lawn. Don't ask me what that means. We just start calling it Get Off My Lawn, and there you have it. I don't want you to get off my lawn. I'd like you to stick around for a while so we can talk about things. Gene just mentioned at the end of the last hour that the whole Mike Miles Dallas School District investigative report story is on page 1 of the newspaper, and it was not the lead story, but the second story on Channel 8 News last night, and it was featured on all the other channels. And the part I really want to get to, the important part, the part I just can't wait to talk about, is the part that's about me. But before we get there, I will control my breathlessness long enough to maybe let you know what in the world any of this is all about. I'm sure there are many of you listening who have no idea what I'm talking about. So we're talking about the Dallas public school system. We're talking about an effort that goes back a year to reform the school system. That's because the school system has horrendous, terrible numbers in terms of the output, especially for poor and minority kids. It does a horrible job of preparing them for college. Forget college. It does a horrible job of preparing them for life. It does a horrible job of teaching them to read and write. And so beginning in the last, it goes back several years, there's been a whole new cadre of leadership in Dallas who said, we got this $1.7 billion a year thing called the public school system. Why don't we see if we can make it work? And there's a ton of research that's backed up by all kinds of scientific data and so on that says you can make these school systems work. You just have to get in there and do it. These reform movements are going on all over the country. Actually, they're going on in other countries. Fascinating stuff about what's going on in Mexico. And what they're running up against everywhere, we're not the Lone Ranger in Dallas, is that you have a huge entrenched bureaucracy and patronage apparatus based on these great big fat budgets. And usually the people who take the whip for that are the school district employees. The teachers unions are blamed for trying to hang on to their jobs at the expense of reform and doing a good job. That's unfair. There are lots of teachers who do a great job. The principals figure in this, but there are more people than just school district employees involved in school district patronage. A huge element in it is, for example, the school construction lobby. These are folks who come in and make mega bucks building new schools, and what they care about are bond programs that pay for all this construction. We have the phenomenon in Dallas of having horrendous maintenance of the buildings we already have, really deplorable conditions in older schools, and yet we're always building these huge fancy new schools, some of which go half empty because they're not where there aren't even students there for them. But what they do is keep the construction lobby happy. So we got this. Between the construction lobby, the teachers, the principals, everybody else, we have a whole bunch of people who have a vested interest in keeping the district the way it is, the status quo. And a year ago, the kind of reform folks brought in this guy, Mike Miles from Colorado. He's always described as former military. He is former military. He's also former State Department. He's also been in public education as a superintendent for years. When you meet him, he's a very charming guy with a lot of self-possession and a lot of self-control, but he's described as former military, which is supposed to mean, I guess, that he's mean and he makes people do stuff they don't want to do. Indeed, Miles put in place this vast reform regime, which is pretty amazing in how extensive and deep running it was and how thoughtful. One of the things that he did, however, was that he kind of unhooked the old patronage machine from their means of control. And on the radio, I don't want to take you through the whole blueprint for that. I'll just tell you that it used to be set up so that individual school board members, especially minority members in southern Dallas, kind of had their own school districts. There were these sub-districts that were laid out to conform to school trustee districts. And so it was almost as if you had as if each trustee was his or her own little superintendent within that district. And part of reform was that Miles said, no, I'm going to be the superintendent. We're going to have one superintendent, that's me. And he unhooked all those mechanisms by which the trustees could control their sub-districts. Well, you're not going to be surprised to hear that the trustees were very, very unhappy with that, some of them, and felt in their hearts that it was truly wrong for him to do this. There's a legacy here that goes back to desegregation, to the days when we had a federal court monitor, and it was sort of part of the deal, in fact, that minority trustees had to sign off on what was going with the court monitor, and that these districts were set up to kind of keep them happy. There was a deal way, way back long ago under a guy named Nolan Estes, which was to create these minority sub-districts. And the deal was sort of, look, if we give you your own district and we give you a bunch of extra money for so-called learning centers and so on, will you just leave us alone about the deseg thing? And the minority plaintiffs said, yes, deal. We got a deal. That was the Dallas deal, that the minority trustees got their own school districts, in effect. And if those districts had been gigantic successes today, if the test scores were through the roof, if we were saying, wow, that worked, man, that's what we needed. This is a great experiment and the results are in, and this has been great for minority kids, then we wouldn't be having this conversation and Mike Miles wouldn't be in town. He's here because this experiment was a dismal failure. It was a terrible failure. It just doesn't, for whatever reason, it ain't working. And the tens of thousands of kids are getting forced through the system, which education statisticians are now calling the cradle to prison pipeline, because of what happens to these kids when they leave school illiterate and unable to do math, and they start selling drugs and stuff to make money. They're immediately thrown into what every study has agreed is a profoundly racist criminal justice system based on the war on drugs, and somehow black cocaine is worse than white cocaine and all that stuff. And so you have this horrendous outcome where these children are just kind of destined for prison from the day they set foot in the kindergarten class. And that's what the whole reform thing is aimed at, turning that around. So there's been a huge amount of resistance to it, a big war. The minority trustees in particular are angry. I say they're protecting their patronage machine. But look, they're going to tell you, no, we're fighting for a system that we developed at great cost here and that we believe is right. And they believe in what they're doing. I think they're wrong. They think they're right. But we have this war going on between the trustees and Miles, and all of this produced a so-called internal investigation of Miles, which was ginned up, cooked up by some of the trustees. It was supposed to be like this little secret FBI within the school district investigated Miles and found out that he was bullying his employees. He was a scary guy, former military, and he was a scary guy and doing all kinds of bad stuff. And he was a crook, and he put his thumb on the scales over a contract. That came to a point where the board generally looked at this internal investigation, which was a mess. It was like a letter from a crazy person, and they said we got to sort this out, and they turned it over to an external lawyer, Paul Coggins, who's a former U.S. attorney in the Northern District of Texas, very respected guy in this part of the country. And they said, Coggins, you investigate this and find out what went on. Did he like bully or beat up his employees in some former military way? And is he a crook? Was he messing with this contract thing in a way that was illegal? And by the way, he shut off this internal investigation. Wasn't that an act of corruption? They were investigating him and he shuts it off. So Coggins gets $100,000. I don't know what to say about that. Lawyers they live in a different world than I do financially, I guess. And the $100,000, I think, is chump change to him. But he gets $100,000 and he spends several weeks and he interviews a bunch of people to investigate the investigation. And so last night the report went to the board, and the agreement was that no one would discuss it publicly. Miles had been told if he talked about it, he'd get fired. He was not given a copy. Secret. Only the board can have this report over the weekend. So within hours, Brett Shipp at Channel 8 has a copy. The other TV channels have a copy. Carla Rangers, who's a school trustee, has put it up on her blog. I was feeling pretty bitter last night because I didn't have a copy. I had to get a copy from Carla Ranger, from her blog. Miles is not allowed to have a copy or talk about it, but all these trustees are dishing it out to TV reporters all over town. And here's where it comes back. You would never, if you watched Brett Shipp's story last night, if you read the morning news today, the story you would see is Coggins finds Miles did bad stuff. Miles in trouble, could be fired. And way down in there, Jim Schutze of Dallas Observer involved in bad stuff. Now, as I said, that's my favorite part that I want to get to because it's about me. But we do have to do some of this backstory first. If you read the report, this is just phenomenal. The report says it says Miles broke no laws. He did nothing wrong about this contract and so on. He had pulling the contract from the agenda. This one thing he was accused of. They were going to vote on the contract, and he pulled it off the agenda at the last minute. The report says actually the thing that was going before the school board was such a mess. There were so many things wrong with the agenda item that it needed to be pulled. So not only did he not do anything wrong, he did the right thing. Then there's another issue about the suspending this internal investigation. Did Miles break the law by suspending this investigation? Well, kind of buried in the report is the fact that, he didn't suspend the investigation. The president of the school board, Eric Cowan, did. Now, that seems significant to me. It goes on and on through this list of charges against Miles, and it finds nothing. It finds nothing. The end product of the basic investigation that Coggins was hired to do was that Miles did nothing. They have a couple things. They say, well, he talked to a couple of witnesses to the investigation, and you're not supposed to talk to witnesses to an investigation, even though these were his employees. I think he's got to talk to them, but he talked to them about the investigation and blah, blah, blah. I guess he did that, and I think that's probably was technically a wrong thing, except wait, the investigation was BS, according to Coggins. So he talked to these witnesses who were going to be called to this investigation that turned out to be BS. The investigation was stupid, and it produced nothing. But Miles talked to these guys who later talked to the investigator. So what? What is that? They talk about splitting hairs. So we're coming up to the end of our first segment, and I haven't even gotten to talk about myself yet. Oh, I can't stand it. But here's where I come into it, and there are two stories in the morning news today talking about me. I wrote a story saying that Mike Miles was not the reason why top school district employees were leaving. They were leaving because the trustees, the school board, was driving them nuts. Excuse me. There's a backstory on that. For months, the morning news and Channel 8 have been doing these stories saying, another Miles top cabinet member leaves. What's the matter with Miles? I never knew that a school superintendent, I thought only the president had a cabinet, or, there was a cabinet in your kitchen or something. But anyway, they make a huge thing out of this, that there's been turnover among Miles's top staff. And I kept getting the story that, there's turnover, not because of Miles, but because of the school board. And what the school board members who are against Miles, what they're doing is they're running off Miles's top people. And then every time they succeeded in running one off, they'd say, look, he can't hold on to his top people. So I was getting this story from my sources that, in fact, it was the school board that was running the people off. Who were my secret sources? Who was telling me this on the back channel? Well, I must concede that some of these reports were published. Eric Celeste, who's often on this show, had already published a column saying not just generally that trustees are running off these top people, but one in particular, Elizabeth Jones, is hell on wheels, and she's the reason they're leaving. I guess we got to, okay, maybe not. I keep thinking we have to do a break, but we don't. So Eric Celeste had already published this story. I had been trying for a couple months to get this story. I kept hearing it, but Eric beat me to it. Well, when another reporter beats you to something, that kind of turns up the heat on you a little, and the competitive juices. And so I started trying harder to get the story. And finally, I did. I got the most recent guy who left, a man named Eric Smelker, to talk to me about why he left. And he said, yeah, I left because that woman, Elizabeth Jones, and the board is just driving me crazy. And I wrote that. And Smelker was very hesitant to talk to me. It was hard to get him to call me. And even when we were on the phone, he was kind of saying, I don't know, man. I don't know about you. We got to talk for a while before I decide if I'm going to talk about this. But I did finally do this catch-up story with Eric. Now, when we come back after the break, I got to tell you, I finally get to talk really about me. I got to tell you what this report says I did and what Miles did. And anyway, are we there? Okay, I'll be back in a minute, and I'll tell you what the report says.
Business owners, tell KNON's listeners about your business. You can put your business or event on KNON. KNON currently has space available to run announcements for you. Tell KNON's listeners about your goods, services, nightclub, concert, or event. Help keep the voice of the people on the air while putting your information on the air. Put your business with Dallas's #1 station. Call now for more information at 214-828-9500, extension 227, or extension 233. For more information, go to knon.org and click on the Run Spots on KNON page. It's a great way for your business to support community radio while letting more people know about you.
When they're gone for good. This is Scott from KNON's Texas Blues Radio telling you don't miss out on some great blues. KNON's Texas Blues Radio Volume 5 Blues CD. It's a CD put together by real blues fans for real blues fans like you. Texas Blues Radio Volume 5 features great local blues from Michael J. and the Paul Bird Band, JJ and the Detonators, the Chris Watson Band, the Two Tones, Rough Cut Blues Band, Jeff Stone with Charlie Love, Dave Millsap, Sirloin and the Ass Kicking Machine, Tutu Jones, Blues Boy Bo, Buddy Whittington, Andrea Dawson, Kirkland James, Sonny Colley, and Johnny Red and the Roosters. Get a copy now at Forever Young Records in Grand Prairie, Recordtown in Fort Worth, and in Dallas at Bill's Records. This is a Dallas Blues collector's item. A very limited amount of vinyl copies can be found at Forever Young Records, the sponsor of this great blues project. CD downloads are available at cdbaby.com. Whether you get it as a download, on vinyl, or on CD, all the proceeds will benefit KNON. For more info on Texas Blues Radio Volume 5, visit knon.org.
How's this for irony? Ronald Reagan, who is worshipped as the supreme deity by small government anti-spending zealots, not only has a government office building in Washington named for him, but it's the biggest and costliest one ever built. The only face-saving factor in this sardonic incongruity is that managers of the Reagan building have embraced a right-wing, laissez-faire concept that the Gipper enthusiastically championed: privatization of government jobs. However, that hasn't worked out to be a positive for his legacy, since Reagan's edifice now stands as a model of private profiteering on the backs of workers. In effect, corporate contractors are using privatization and our tax dollars to transform America into a low-wage nation of gross inequality. The building is public property, but its food concessions have been turned over to such multi-billion-dollar fast food chains as Subway. Not only do they pay low wages with no benefits, but they're also being charged with, quote, serious, willful, and chronic wage theft. In particular, workers in the food court have filed formal complaints with the Labor Department, documenting that while work weeks of 60, 70, and even 80 hours are common, they're never paid overtime. Not only is this a rank violation of our fair labor laws, but the practice also means they're being paid less than the minimum wage. This is Jim Hightower saying, come on, even Reagan favored at least a minimal level of decency, fairness, and respect for workers. Where's the morality in CEOs grabbing tax dollars to help subsidize their lavish executive pay packages, then turning around and stiffing their own workers in our name? To help counter this despicable corporate conversion of government into a force for poverty jobs, contact Good Jobs Nation at www.goodjobsnation.org.
Get off my lawn.
Jim Schutze, back with Get Off My Lawn. We've been talking about the Paul Coggins investigation of DISD, Mike Miles, and all these allegations. And in the first segment, I was telling you how if you watch this story on the news or on Channel 8, they had a big investment in Coggins finding something bad. Brett Shipp in particular is a guy I admire very much. He's a good reporter, but he just had a bunch of stories for a couple of weeks saying Coggins is going to find something bad, I promise you. And so Coggins found nothing bad. All the charges that were brought against Miles just blow up and turn to dust when you read this report. Except, and you know, I guess if you're in Coggins's position, you don't want to hand the client back a report that makes the client look stupid. You want to give them something. You want to give them some little fig leaf so they can say to the public, we didn't throw this $100,000 down a rat hole. I mean, look, we had something. So what is this something? Well, this something is a deal that involves me. And I had explained in the last hour how there'd been, in the last segment, how there'd been this ongoing narrative about the school district, especially in the news and at Channel 8, where they're saying Mike Miles can't hold on to his top staff. They're all leaving and so on. And I always thought that raised the question in the background, so what? Was he brought here to show how good he was at holding on to his top staff? No, he was brought here to change the whole school district from top to bottom. So if there's turnover in the staff, so there's turnover. I mean, if there are people who kind of are uncomfortable in the role or they don't work out, one view would be that it's a healthy thing if they're leaving. The guy you should worry about is the guy who has no turnover. And so everybody just stays there forever. But anyway, there was a story about turnover in the staff. Why can't Miles hang on to his top people? And I was chasing this story that Eric Celeste actually broke, saying that at least with the last two, they left not because of Miles, but because of the school board, a certain school trustees, and the last one named Elizabeth Jones, who's a white trustee from North Dallas. And she was just, the guy said that he hated appearing before the school board because Jones drove her crazy. And so life was too short and he left town. And I finally got him to tell me that story. Now, the Coggins people never called me. They never tried to reach me. They never emailed me. They never made any attempt. In this report, they connect a bunch of dots that have to do with me in a very suggestive way. They say that this guy, Smelker, who left, wrote a bad letter about Elizabeth Jones. He said, I'm leaving and I'm mad at Elizabeth Jones. They say that he had help writing this letter from a public relations consultant, Lisa LeMaster. They say that Mike Miles saw this letter, and Mike Miles, according to Coggins, was somehow giving Smelker advice about how to write the letter. And then they say that Mike Miles one day had phone conversations with Jim Schutze of the Dallas Observer. They don't say what was said, and they say he exchanged a text message with Schutze. They don't say what the text message was. And then they say, later, Schutze published a story saying that Smelker quit because of Elizabeth Jones. So the whole connecting of dots in the Coggins report is that Mike Miles thought up this whole thing. Mike Miles grabs Smelker and says, listen, buddy, here's what you're going to say in that letter. And then he gets Smelker to say it, and then he says, okay, call up that guy at the Observer, Schutze. We can tell him what to do. Tell him to write something about this. And so Mike Miles Mike Miles causes this thing to be published in the Observer. And that's what this report suggests. And then it says, so even though Coggins, I found that all of the stuff you hired me for $100,000 to investigate was BS, and there's nothing to it. There is this thing where maybe Mike Miles, if you connect the dots, caused Jim Schutze at the Observer to print this story saying the guy quit because of a school trustee, and that's wrong because Miles's contract says he's got to get along with the board. So if this happened, if we connect all these dots, maybe Miles isn't getting along with the board, and that's a violation of his contract. And so when the public asks you, hey, what did you give Coggins $100,000 for? If this all turned out to be BS, you can say, no, it wasn't all BS, because look, there's this thing in here about Mike Miles making Schutze put that column in the Observer. And again, the Coggins people never called me. In my business, if you're going to connect dots on a guy, you at least got to call the guy and say, what's your version of the dots? You don't have to buy his version, but you can't, when you don't know what happened and you're connecting dots and you're painting a picture about somebody, you've at least got to give the person you're connecting the dots on a chance to give you his version of the picture. So they never called me. Now, what I would have told them, I would have told them two things. Don't ask me how I got letters or interviews or anything. I'm not going to tell you that. That's part of my reporting. I think they knew I would tell them that. And the letter, the thing, that's a public document. I'm a member of the public. I got it. That's all you need to know. But I would have said, look, the picture you're painting here is wrong. None of this started with Mike Miles. The Smelker deal and my getting to Smelker and getting my hands on that letter, please excuse me, had to do with my job as a reporter and my months-long effort to get to this story, and the fact that Eric Celeste had already broken the story. You didn't mention that, Coggins, in your report where you suggest that Mike Miles planted this story. The story was already out there. It had already broken. I was doing catch-up. So that's catch up, C-A-T-C-H-U-P. Yeah, not the condiment. We have a lot of comedians here in the studio who are sort of doing pantomime in front of me. So anyway, the scenario in the Coggins report is that Miles cooked up this whole thing about Smelker's resignation. And I'm telling you, the Coggins people deliberately did not call me and did not email me because they knew I was going to tell them, no, that's the opposite of what happened. What happened was I got that story because Celeste had already done it. It was already out there. It wasn't easy getting Smelker to talk. He was very uncomfortable with that process, but he finally did. And as for all this stuff about Lisa LeMaster helped Smelker write the letter, Lisa LeMaster wrote drafts of the letter and gave them to Smelker and said, okay, if you say this is how it's going to look. Apparently early on, Smelker wanted to name Jones in his letter. And as I understand it, LeMaster gives Smelker a draft saying, okay, just want you to see what it's like on paper. Because a lot of times people think they want to say something, and I've found this too, and then they see it in print and they think, I'm not so sure about that. And that's what happened in this case. I believe that story because before any of this got going, before any of it was even under discussion, that's what Smelker told me. When he finally opened up, when we were on the phone, he said, look, I showed this stuff to Lisa to kind of get another set of eyes on it, and she helped me revise it so that it wouldn't be personally hurtful. Smelker said he wanted to get across his point about the board and governance and why people were leaving, but after he saw LeMaster's draft, he agreed, I don't know, I don't want to name Elizabeth Jones. So in the end, LeMaster had the effect of moderating the tone of this thing, but also those are drafts. Those are nobody's business. Those aren't public. That wasn't the letter. This is people trading stuff back and forth. If you could seize control of my computer and go back in and look at my early drafts of columns I write. Oh my goodness, you'd find some very bad stuff in there, and that's because I have a mechanism in my head, a little bell that rings. I write it one way, and then the bell rings and says, "Schutze, you better go back and look at that again." And I do, and I realize, no, I can't say that. I can't do that. So drafts are private. Even if they're shared between people, they're private because they're not what anybody's saying. But what happened in this case was that the Morning News got their hands on a draft. And the biggest picture in all of this is that they're taking this stuff, these drafts of letters, they're connecting these dots between Mike Miles and Lisa Lemaster and me, and they're trying to paint a picture in which Miles is on the warpath against his school trustees. Well, it's not trustees, plural, anyway. We're only talking about a few. And listen, there is this canon in the setup at the district that the superintendent is to maintain good relations with the board, and they're to have a trust relationship, and they're not supposed to go out and disparage each other in public. Isn't that a two-way street? How can you have a deal where he can't say anything about them, but they can leak these reports, they can talk about what happened in executive session, they can say all kinds of terrible stuff about him, and that's okay. I mean, look, I don't care what it says in the contract. That's an absurd notion. That just violates basic moral logic and human nature. If they want to have a trust relationship with the superintendent where he doesn't disparage them in public, then they can't constantly go to the media and disparage him. And they can't. What kind of deal is it where they're running off his top people? He can't hang on to his people because you got people like the other trustee, Bernadette Nuttall, is going out buttonholing Miles's staff on campuses and saying, you better not do what the superintendent tells you to do because he ain't going to be around that long, and I am. So you do what I say. And that's all documented. So how can you have a deal where the trustees can do that to him? They can go around and undermine him and try to, both in public and with his staff, but he has to be really sweet to them, and he can't tell his side of the story. That doesn't make sense. There's another piece of this that I want to talk about in the last section, which is the deal about Rebecca Rodriguez, the woman who left after Miles' former military allegedly bullied her. And that's one of the most absurd chapters in this whole thing. We got Tony on line 3. Tony, are you still there?
Yes, how you doing?
Tony, what's up?
All right. See, I'm glad you get a backstory to how the district got to where this situation is. And, given that I know the Dallas News has always stretched the truth, you have the right to defend yourself. Now, what I want to talk about is when I called last week, you had a gentleman, this gentleman on there last week.
Renee Martinez, yeah.
Renee Martinez. And I said this. I said, it is a battle over money.
Right.
And one thing he said after I got the phone, he said, Bernadette Nuttall, you understand that the demographics is changing. Which supported what I said before I got the phone was, it is a fight over money. It is a fight over race. It is a fight. It's not about the kids. And once he said that, he proved my point to the utmost. I couldn't do myself. I did. Right. But the thing is, he said the demographics is changing. He said it's not about he is defending the Hispanic kids.
And that's Tony. I think that's a very important subtext for all of this. That if you look at the neighborhoods that these schools are serving in southern Dallas, some of the neighborhoods that were for decades traditionally black neighborhoods aren't black anymore. I mean, everybody's left, and they've been replaced by Hispanics, right?
Yeah, and see, my thing is, I understand that. see, my thing is, I'm open enough to understand that the demographics have changed, but the reality is, everybody's trying to carve the same pie, and for him not to admit that, even for the black constituents not to admit that, and even for the white to not to admit that, is basically where the fracture is that, okay, here's a billion dollar business.
Right.
I want my part of the pie. If I don't get it, I'm going to destroy the whole pie. And that's why my point is, it's not about the kids. It never has been about the kids. It's been about the people in power, whether they're black, Hispanic, or white, carving up the money and say, okay, the kids are first. That's not the truth.
And
that's
you make a good point. We have to go to our break, but Tony, thank you.
If it's time to get rid of your old gas guzzler, the KNON Vehicle Donation Program can help. There's still a market for those old vehicles, and if you donate it, you're helping to support quality programming here on KNON. Just call 877-KNON-AUTO or go online to knon.org. We'll take care of everything from pickup to tax paperwork. That's 877-KNON-AUTO or online at knon.org.
That's all right.
Yeah.
Sweet
these are the ones you got.
Louisiana Red, and I'm celebrating my 16th anniversary on KNON, Saturday, September the 21st, at the Sons of Herman Hall, with my good friend, T.J. Hooker Taylor, son of Dallas Blues legend Johnny Taylor, the hit maker, Little Jimmy and the Feedback Band, and James White, you answer my cell phone butler. Doors will open at 7 p.m. Music at 8 p.m. I'll be DJing and MCing with that down-home blues and soul mix. So come on out and party with me. Tickets are available now at knon.org. Bill's Records in Dallas. Forever Young Records in Grand Prairie. The Sons of Herman Hall is located at 3414 Elm Street in Dallas. That's T.J. Hooker Taylor, Lil Jimmy, and the Feedback Band, James Butler, and a big party at the Sons of Herman Hall, celebrating 16 years of Louisiana Red's down-home blues and soul mix on KNON, the voice of the people. This is a KNON benefit, sponsored in part by Beneficial Consultant Services, LLC.
Hey, babes. I'll take one now.
It's back with Get Off My Lawn. We've been talking about this Coggins report, and I think I saved the best piece for last, which is the whole issue of this lady named Rebecca Rodriguez, who was head of the communications department. She left. I don't know what you call the circumstances of her departure exactly, but she left, and she was very unhappy, and she accused Miles of bullying. According to this internal report that the little secret FBI department within the school district produced, she had accused Miles of bullying her. And, bullying, you think, what, did he lay hands on her? He hit her or something? And also that her departure was a form of retaliation. So if you read this external report that Paul Coggins' law firm has produced, you find that you got the internal report from the secret FBI within the school district, and it says Rebecca Rodriguez says that Miles bullied her. You read the Coggins report, they called Rebecca Rodriguez in, and they said, well, tell us about this bullying thing. And she says, no, that never happened. So that's the end of that. But the other thing, what about the retaliation thing? That her departure was a form of retaliation. Well, the other thing that comes out of the Coggins report was that when they interviewed DISD lawyers, the lawyers from within the district painted for them the scene where Rebecca Rodriguez was mad about this and that, the contracting business, and she called the lawyer, the head lawyer, Jack Elrod, and Elrod describes her as hysterical. That's his word. She was hysterical. So he says, well, we got to sort this out. And so they arranged this meeting that's Rebecca Rodriguez and Mike Miles, her boss, and the lawyers, and what happened. Tell us, Rebecca, what happened. And in this meeting, Rebecca Rodriguez, according to Elrod, calls Miles despicable, says he's a despicable person, and that he has usurped her authority. So soon after, she's no longer working there. No kidding. Well, how can you imagine going to your boss and saying, sir, you have usurped my authority? I know what they'd say in the newspaper business. They'd say, Schutze, usurp yourself out of here. You don't have any authority. You have the authority that we give you. So that whole deal about Rebecca Rodriguez, who's a former TV reporter, a well-known person in the market who went to work to run the communications department, accused Miles, told somebody that Miles had bullied her, which sounds like something physical, and said that that her departure was a form of retaliation. That whole thing comes up to zip nothing in the Coggins report. Rebecca Rodriguez herself says, nah, I wasn't bullied. And then you get this little picture painted for you where she's in a meeting and she's calling her boss, Mike Miles, despicable, and telling him in front of the lawyers that he has usurped her authority. Well, no kidding, she had to leave. How can you can't act like that and keep working for somebody. I think that one of the things that's maybe easy to miss here, but it's a point I want to make, is that this whole thing is also a huge reflection on this internal investigation that DISD did. If I'm the DISD, they call it the Office of Professional Responsibility. That's the little FBI thing, and it's a rogue element. They think that they don't have a boss, but they do. They work for the superintendent, but they think they don't. So anyway, you get a high-level employee in there, Rebecca Rodriguez, and she says, the superintendent bullied me. I think before you put that in a report, you recognize the seriousness of the charge. And so you say, what do you mean, bullied? Why did you choose that word? Is there something? Did you feel physically threatened? What do you mean, bullied? You make her spell it out. And then you think to yourself, I ain't putting this in a report unless I'm sure she's going to stick to it. And so you question her about that. How strongly do you feel this way? How passionately are you committed to making this charge? Are you going to stick with it if I put this in the report? Well, they did none of that. And this was the thing I found so crazy about this OPR internal report. It was like crazy gossip. It was like a letter it looked like a letter that you get from a crazy person. It had all these different typefaces and underlinings and red ink and black ink. And then it has this breathless quality. Oh, and listen to this. Rebecca Rodriguez says that he bullied her and so on. And there's no depth to any of it. There's no substantiation of any of it. And what this Coggins report showed was that, among other things, the internal report, the little internal FBI report, was junk. It was just trash. It was so unprofessional. It wouldn't pass muster in your average garden club. It wasn't even that great as gossip, and that's why the Coggins report did not uphold any of the internal report. I'm unhappy that the Coggins people didn't call me I've known Coggins forever. He could have called me. He knows that. I think that they're not calling me was deliberate. I think they had a little scenario they wanted to paint with this connect the dots game. And I think they knew from other stuff I'd written that I wasn't going to support the scenario. And that's why they didn't call me. And I think that's dirty pool. But, it's about me, so I'm touchy about it. Generally, you would have to say about Paul Coggins that he's about as trustworthy a dude for this sort of investigation as you could get, and that's based on his career, his private career as an attorney, but also his years as the U.S. attorney. Coggins was not at all afraid or shy about taking on cases as U.S. attorney that actually worked really badly for him politically, but I think his reputation there was that he followed the truth. And with the exception of the little Jim Schutze scenario that I'm not happy about, but there you have it. I think the rest of this report is really solid, and it's like a bucket of ice water on that internal report. It just shows irrefutably that the internal report was junk. It's also a big plate of crow for my friend Brett Shipp at Channel 8. Great reporter, respect and admire him, but Brett, this is a crow burger for you. All your stuff about how something huge was going to come out of this Coggins investigation turned out to be wrong. And this is also a portion of crow, a big portion of crow for Matthew Haig and Tonnell Hobbs and their editors at the Morning News, because they've played this Coggins investigation with the big scary chords on the organ. Here it comes. Oh boy, this is gonna be bad. That former military guy Miles accused of bullying this good-looking, nice lady who used to work for the TV station. The Coggins is going to get to the bottom of that. And what the report says was that all that stuff was a bunch of BS cooked up. Well, it doesn't say this, so I'll just tell you this. Cooked up by these same school board members who want to get rid of want to get rid of Mike Miles because they want to stop the reform effort, because they want to keep their control, their hands on the patronage machinery. We always need to go back to that big picture. We hired this guy, Miles, to come in here and do this huge job, take over the whole school district, remake the whole school district. We didn't hire him to come in here and make the school board happy, did we? No, we didn't. And so when somebody takes on something that huge, of course, you can get out your Inspector Clouseau magnifying glass and you can go find little mistakes that he made somewhere. You can't do that much stuff without making some mistakes. You're going to break some eggs to get the omelet cooked. Absolutely, but that's not the question. The question is, how is he doing in terms of proceeding toward a revolutionary and comprehensive reform of the school district? And when you go to that story, wow, he's doing pretty good. The numbers are good for student achievement. This whole mechanism that he's put in place with an academy, like an officer's training school for principals, seems to be cranking along exactly the way it's supposed to. He's went through this painful process of replacing a lot of principals. That went exactly the way it was supposed to. All of the stuff that he came here to do, he's doing. And in particular, don't forget that little piece I told you about earlier where he created these area executives. He created a new parallel mechanism that unplugged the old mechanism that gave each trustee their own school district. And he said, no, It's all my. If I'm going to do this, it's all my school district. I run it. We're not going to have 10 cooks here. We're going to have one cook, and I'm responsible. If you don't like what I'm doing, fire me. But I'm going to run the show. That mechanism's absolutely in place and absolutely working. I know that it's been very uncomfortable for a lot of people. There are a lot of teachers who are very, very unhappy about the way it's gone. I think that really unfair pressure has been brought to bear on teachers. Teachers are like reporters. They're like, there's some of us in every business we're the worker bees. We're the frontline people. And it always comes down on our shoulders, doesn't it? That's sort of a fact of life. I don't think you blame Miles and the reform for that. I think you can't achieve this kind of change without a lot of that happening. And you have a lot of bad principals out there who got scared and who took it out on the teachers. That's where a lot of that came from. But if you look at Miles in terms of the overall reform, you would say, wow, it's amazing. He's completely redrawn the org chart. He's completely reshaped the district. And in the first year of it, he's got results in student achievement, which should be all that we care about. So his deal is working. So what? You're going to fire him because if you connect the dots, it looks like he sent a text message to that Jim Schutze at the Observer. I don't know. As much as I like talking about my part of it, does that not make my part a tad more important than it really is? If you really back away and you look at this whole landscape and you look at the larger architecture of the whole situation and you say, we've got these 150,000 children we're trying to educate, and we've done a miserable job in the past, and this affects their lives drastically. It affects our city and it affects our society. And wow, here's this dude who came in here and in 1 year put in place stuff that looks like it might turn that around. How important is the text message to Jim Schutze in that scenario? I don't think it's even visible. And look, we're not suckers in this city. We're not fools. When you start saying that you want to can the guy or run him off because of these technoid mistakes that he made, and I'm sure he's made mistakes, but when you start saying you want to run him off because of these tiny little mistakes, we know that's not what you mean. We know that's not what you're up to. We know that you're trying to find gotchas because you want to get him out of here for some reason you don't want to talk about. And those are big reasons, very big reasons. Those are reasons that have to do with, multi-billion-dollar bond issues that go out to the construction industry. They have to do with a billion-dollar-plus payroll every year that the trustees used to have control over. They used to be able to do thumbs up, thumbs down on who gets to be a principal, even who gets to be a teacher. That's what's on the table. That's why they're trying to put these little nicks in the guy and find these little handholds so they can pull him down so they can get their hands back on that $1 billion a year payroll and the $1 billion plus bond programs to fund construction. And all of this little penny ante stuff is cover story. And all of that, the thing to remember about the Coggins report is that the Coggins report showed conclusively that internal report that started all of this was garbage. It was nothing. None of it held up. It went away like used Kleenex or something. It was pathetic. They need to shut that operation down. It's way more harm than good. And what else? I just think if you back away from the thing and you look at the kind of the line of the mountains out there, what we really should be doing, we should be opening our hearts and our hope and our optimism, and we should be saying, wait, this is all just chatter. This is ground clutter. This is nothing. If you look at the mountains, this dude, this Mike Miles, is doing something. He's actually changing this huge behemoth entity that we've all given up on over the years. We've all decided it can't be changed. It's too big. It's too entrenched. It's too much of a mess. It ain't worth it. He's changing it. He really is. He's turning it around. And why would we give up on that now? I hope we don't. I think the story, the DISD story, is a good story. It's a happy story, just not the part about me. See you next week. Jim Schutze with Get Off My Lawn. Thanks for listening.
Get off my lawn.
KNON 89.3 FM in Dallas and Fort Worth, the voice of the people.
Business owners, tell KNON's listeners about your business. You can put your business or event on KNON. KNON currently has space available to run announcements for you. Tell KNON's listeners about your goods, services, nightclub, concert, or event. Help keep the voice of the people on the air while putting your information on the air. KNON's been named the #1 radio station in Dallas by both the Dallas Observer and D Magazine. Put your business with Dallas's #1 station. Call now for more information at 214-828-9500, extension 227, or extension 233. For more information, go to KNON.org and click on the Run Spots on KNON page. It's a great way for your business to support community radio while letting more people know about you.